Hello, Assalamu alaikum. In this video, we will discuss nanomaterials for different environmental applications. So, the nanomaterials can be used in the field of air, water, and wastewater and soil because they can be used for two purposes for detecting pollutants and for removing pollutants. So, there are several methods that have been developed for the efficient use of nanomaterials in this field as nanoadsorbent, as nanofilters, nanophotocatalysts, magnetic nanoparticles, and nanosensors. First of all, I'll discuss nanosensors for monitoring of environmental pollutants. So here's the question that why do we need nanosensors? We need nanosensors for the collection of data related to pollution in each region, for the determination of type of pollution and extent of spread of pollution in each region. And for these detections, we'll need nanosensors so that an appropriate strategy will be then determined to deal with the pollution. So there are some advantages associated with the use of nanosensors, like they are less costly and they can be applied on large scale. They are highly selective and highly sensitive and give low detection limits up to parts per billion and parts per million. Consume less energy and transmit information wirelessly and provide real-time analysis. And they operate for a long time at low voltage. I'm going to discuss basic design of a nanosensor. For designing a nanosensor, first we'll select the environmental contaminant like copper, nickel, etc. Then we'll select the number of analytes to be determined by our nanosensor. Like if our nanosensor will detect one analyte at a time, it will be termed as single plex, and if it will determine more than one analytes at a time, it will be termed as multiplex nanosensor. Then we'll design the nanosensor probe. This probe consists of one or more recognition and core elements. These core elements may be DNA, enzymes, or RNA, as in case of biosensors. Then the probe consists of one or more nanomaterials and then a single transduction system. This single transduction system converts a physical or chemical change into electrical signal. And then a sensor deployment format is selected, that how the nanosensor will be used in practical applications. Like I'll later discuss an example in which our nanosensor will be deployed on a filter paper strip. So there are generally three types of nanosensors: optical nanosensors, mechanical nanosensors, and electrochemical nanosensors. Optical nanosensors work by using electromagnetic radiations to generate an analytical signal in a transduction element. Mechanical nanosensors, they can detect very small change in displacement, force, or mass and then generate a signal. And electrochemical nanosensors measure the electrical current, potential, conductance, or impedance at the electrode and sample matrix interface and then generate the signal. I've chosen two practical applications of nanosensors. First example is of gold nanosensors that are used for sensing lead and copper ions. These gold nanosensors give the detection limit of 10 parts per billion. I'll explain this gold nanosensor with the help of diagram. So here's the diagram of our gold nanosensor. For the synthesis of gold nanosensor, first gold nanoparticles are synthesized by the reaction between sodium citrate and citrate tetrachloride aurate. Red colored gold nanoparticles are synthesized. This gold nanosensor is first conjugated with thioctic acid linkers, and secondly they are conjugated with another layer of densyl hydrazine, that is a fluorescent probe. Then this nanosensor is deployed on a Wattman filter paper strip by micromachining method by CO2 laser, carbon dioxide laser engraving system. Then this nanosensor deployed on filter paper is kept into a solution containing copper and lead ions. Copper and lead ions bind to the binding sites on the nanosensor. The color of nanosensor changes from red to blue, and in this way this nanosensor detects copper and lead ions. Secondly, the fluorescence of densyl hydrazine is quenched. So this nanosensor works by turn off fluorescence detection system. Absorption spectra of our nanosensors. In the absence of copper and lead ions, the peaks are obtained at 20 nanometer. And in the presence of copper and lead ions at solution in solution at pH 7, the peaks are obtained at 620 nanometer. There is a red shift that is observed in this spectra. So, and the copper and lead ions show different absorbance. This is because copper ions bind more readily to the nanosensors, and lead ions take few seconds to bind to the nanosensors. Here's another example of nanosensors for pesticide detection in soil. As we know, pesticides concentration in soil is quite alarming due to their adverse effects on human health. So it is necessary to remove pesticides and insecticides from soil. Several nanosensors are designed for detection of and concentration of pesticides in the soil. Nanomaterial based active sensors are currently used for development of for the detection of acetamiprid in the soil. Acetamiprid is an insecticide that has been proven as a human carcinogen. So it is necessary to detect it in its concentration in the soil. Then the apta sensor nanomaterials have quite unique optical and electrical properties, so they can be used for this purpose.
I am Naz Qureshi with you, and I'm going to talk about the applications of nanotechnology in reducing water pollutions. So basically, I'm going to talk about three different challenges regarding water pollution. The first one is the removal of industrial water pollutants, including dyes, organic solvents, heavy metals, and oils from water. Secondly, I'm going to talk about the desalination processes, including the removal of salt from water or oceanic or seawater to make it drinkable. And the third one, I'm going to talk about the removal of bacteria and viruses from. So the firstly, I'm going to talk about the fluorine nanochannels. So here, this is the structure of a fluorine nanochannel that is made up of multiple fluorine nanorings that are stacked over each other, and they are embedded on an impermeable membrane, just like the cell walls of the cells. So here the whole phenomena lies here. The fluorines that have negative charge and the salt also have negative charge in terms of chlorine. So whenever that water passes through these coils, that negative charge of chlorine get repulsed by fluorine. So that means the water, the salt actually does not pass through it in the water, but water can. So that means it is a very simple phenomenon by which water gets. The second, I'm going to talk about the solar power water filters. So these are actually the nano filters that are just made, just like the structure is actually similar to that of the solar cells and solar panels. So this actually the basic things which we are making here is the titanium dioxide nanowires, and that are being doped with the carbon nanotubes. That means we are going to use both of these things, including carbon nanotubes and titanium dioxide as a filter to remove the bacteria or different viruses. So actually titanium dioxide itself is a very good purifying agent, but whenever we are doping it or we are incorporating carbon nanotubes inside of it and making a composite out of it, so it enhances the pasteurizing ability of the water, and it kills different kind of bacteria, including Campylobacter, E. coli, Salmonella, etc. So what actually happens is, whenever UV light or UV light from the sun just fall on this filter, is to produce the molecules that are reactive oxygen species, including peroxide, hydroxide, or oxygen having negative 2 charge, which act as a pathogenic killers. So that means that all pathogens get killed by these reactive oxygens. The third one I'm going to talk about are the graphene sheet channels. We all know that graphene sheets are horizontally aligned, and they have very tiny spaces between them, which are in nanometers range, but we can't use graphene sheet in horizontal manners because that take a lot of time for water to pass through it. So we have to find some ways by which we can make the graphene channels or sheets that are horizontal. Instead of horizontally, they are vertically arranged. So the scientists came up with an idea of creating these kind of the vertical graphene sheet. So they actually basically they stacked the graphene sheet on the elastic substrate, and that was under the tension it was stretched out, and whenever the graphene sheet has been deposited on here on that stretched surface, and when that tension has been released from it, and it allowed that the graphene sheet to concrete and different kind of peaks and valleys has been formed. Then afterwards it was encased in epoxy and the tops and bottom was cut so that it makes vertical channels instead of horizontal. So that means there are very tiny space and the contaminants get trapped inside of it and water passes easily. Next one is OHM, which is olefinic, hydrophobic and magnetic sponges. So basically the main idea is to create OHM, which is a composite material made up of magnetic nanostructures and carbon based substrate to make OHM. So what actually it is we have to take a basic common sponge and we have to dip it in the solution which is made up of this nano composites, 3D structures including carbon based substrates and magnetic nano substrates. So whenever these material are deposited on the sponge, and then this sponge is used to absorb oil on the surface whenever we have oil spillage or oil leakage. So it absorbs all of the oil, leaving behind the clean water. It does not, due to its hydrophobic nature, it does not react with the water, so it just absorbs the oil and it has a very good efficiency to retain that oil. So until or unless we do not squeeze out the oil, it will retain that for a longer period of time. Next one is a photocatalysis to decompose organic molecule. Basically this phenomena is used for the decomposition of different kind of dyes. Here I have shown the degradation of the methylene blue dye. So what actually happens here is we have taken the silver chloride nanowires and we have doped it with the gold nanoparticles to enhance its photocatalytic ability, because it was first only absorbing the UV radiations, but now after addition of the gold nanoparticles, it become photocatalytic in the visible region as well. So that makes its photocatalytic property more enhanced to degrade the methylene blue dye under visible light as well. Next is the nano sheet filters. So here this structure is seeing here is actually the gallium based liquid metal, which is with aluminum oxide nano thin sheets. So basically this whole thing consists of different vertically arranged sheets which has a very small diameter so that water can easily pass through it, but the contaminants that are present inside of the water, including the heavy metals, for example we can say lead and cadmium, so it has a very good efficiency for lead and cadmium, so they get trapped inside of it and the clean water gets separated out of water.
Assalamu alaikum, this is Anusha Batul, and now I am going to discuss the applications of nanotechnology in reducing soil pollution. As we all know that soil is an important component of ecosystem, soil contamination, degradation are serious environmental problems which led to different challenges to food security and agricultural productivity. Different sources of soil pollution include industrial and domestic waste, fertilizer and pesticides. Different physical, biological, chemical methods are also available for the soil remediation. Along with these methods, the emerging field is a nano-remediation technique, which is a cost-effective, more reactive and on-site technique that involves the application of reactive nanomaterial into the contaminated soil for the detoxification of pollutants. Different NPs include calcium oxide, zero-valent metal oxide, and polymeric NPs, which are used for the removal of heavy metals, detergent, pesticide, organic compounds like gasoline from the soil. Next are NZVIs, that are nanoscale zero-valent iron. They have a core shell structure that enables them to behave as an electron source and site for the complexation. Their removal efficiency is based on absorption and reducing power, and they are involved in the removal of organic and inorganic contaminants from the soil. NZVIs have been modified with several coatings such as PVP, that is polyvinyl pyrrolidone, as well as starch. The benefit of this is that they have fast action kinetics and more removal properties than simple NZVIs. Research have been done in order to check the immobilization of arsenic in the contaminated soil by using iron sulfide, magnetite, and ZVI nanoparticles. It was found that iron-based NPs effectively decrease arsenic bioaccessibility and leachability in the soil and thus mitigating the toxicity of arsenic by making a comparison with treated and untreated soil sample with NPs because of the greater adsorption with the passage of time between the arsenic and iron nanoparticles. Another study demonstrated the immobilization of mercury in soil. It can be seen from graph that by using carboxymethyl cellulose stabilized FES concentration of mercury decreases in the soil sample up to 90% because of great affinity between mercury and sulfur group that can effectively immobilize mercury in the treated soil samples. Next are calcium peroxide (NPs). They have a beneficial role in removing aromatic substances, oil, hydrocarbon, pesticide, and gasoline from soil. They reduce the agglomeration of individual moieties once they have been applied or released into the soil. One of the examples includes degradation of 2,4,6-trinitrotoluene in soil that has been done with calcium peroxide NPs. Different concentration of calcium peroxide and calcium hydroxide NPs have been used for treating TNT contaminated soil for 24 hours. It was observed that with the passage of time, concentration of TNT in soil sample were decreasing and oxidation in case of 0.2% was very much high in comparison with other concentrations. In a study, effect of graphene oxide nanomaterial in cadmium contaminated soil samples for over 60 days were evaluated. It was seen that graphene oxide immobilized the cadmium through surface complexation and electrostatic interaction. The functional group of graphene oxide induce a negative charge on their surface and oxygen atom of these functional group donate their only pair of electrons to the metal ion, and it increases the capacity of cation exchange of graphene oxides and facilitate a decrease in the available concentration of cadmium in the soil samples.
Assalamu alaikum. This is Farah Shabir and I am going to discuss about the nanotechnology in reducing air pollution. First of all, we need to understand what is air pollution. Air pollution is defined as the alteration in the natural composition of the atmosphere, and it is caused by physical, chemical, and biological substances emitted from anthropogenic, geogenic, or biological sources. According to WHO, around 7 million people died due to air pollution exposure, so it is a major concern. And the today's main problem is global warming, which is caused by greenhouse gases, and the main greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxides, and fluorinated gases. As carbon dioxide represents 75% of greenhouse gases in the environment, so several techniques have been proposed to control its emissions, such as biofiltration, adsorption in liquids, and adsorption of solids. But the adsorption on nanomaterial is proved to be more efficient and cost-effective process because of its enhanced adsorption capacity due to their large surface area and their ability to be regenerated. Common absorbents which are used are activated carbon, zeolite, silica adsorbents, and single wall nanotubes. And the chemical modification of single wall nanotubes will have a good potential to capture the greenhouse gas carbon dioxide, as it is shown in the graph that the raw single wall nanotube has the adsorption capacity of 22.7, which is smaller as compared to ethylene diamine and polyethylene amine, and the 3-amino propyl ethoxysilane, which has the largest adsorption capacity of 40.8. The reason is that as APTS has a functional group has abundant amine groups that provide numerous chemical sites for carbon dioxide adsorption, and which results in the formation of carbamate ions which have the ability for the further adsorption of carbon dioxide. Next is the adsorption of nitrous oxides. Common adsorbers which are used include zeolites, activated carbon, and ferric oxyhydroxide dispersed on active carbon fiber. CNTs could also be used as an adsorbent for the removal of nitrogen oxides. The reason is that the surface chemistry of CNTs, which allow its chemical modification accordingly. When nitrogen oxide and oxygen pass through CNTs, nitrogen oxide is oxidized into nitrogen dioxide, which is then adsorbed on the surface of the CNTs, which have the nitrate group attached to it. In the graph, it is shown that the CNTs have the largest adsorption capacity for nitrogen oxides, then for sulfur dioxide, and then for carbon dioxide. So it is necessary to chemically modify the CNTs for the adsorption of carbon dioxide. Another method is the use of silver titanium oxide thin films, which are prepared by dip coating on glass tubes. And as titanium oxide shows photocatalytic activity, so it is provide great decomposition of nitrogen dioxide. As it is shown in the picture, as titanium oxide is eliminated by light, it generates the electron hole pairs, and then holes are responsible for the production of hydroxide radicals, which react with nitrogen oxide to produce nitrogen dioxide, and this nitrogen dioxide is then adsorbed by the carbon species. Next is the removal of sulfur dioxide. As sulfur dioxide is the major pollutant from the industrial effluents, so its removal is necessary. For this purpose, activated carbon with deposited iron nanoparticles at adsorbent is used. Nanoparticles are used due to their enhanced adsorption capacity. Sulfur dioxide adsorbs onto the activated carbon surface and results in the formation of sulfuric acid, and this sulfuric acid leads to the some changes in the morphology or characteristics of the used material. It makes the used material slightly acidic. The last one is the absorption of isopropyl alcohol. Isopropyl alcohol is the main solvent and it is used in the manufacturing of optoelectronic devices and semiconductors. So the release of isopropyl alcohol vapors can cause harm to human health as it is irritating and carcinogenic. So its removal is done by single bond nanotubes, which are oxidized by the solution of nitric acid, sodium hypochlorite and hydrochloric acid. Single wall nanotubes were improved after being oxidized by HCl, HNO3 and NaClO because oxidation reduces the pore size of adsorbent and also increase the its surface area. Consequently, single walled carbon nanotubes are able to absorb more isopropyl alcohol from the air stream. um, Oxidation by sodium chloride had the best performance to adsorb isopropyl alcohol, followed by nitric acid and HCl. And there are two interaction of adsorption: chemical interaction and physical interaction. Chemical interaction is through the chemical bonding, and physical interaction by the van der Waals forces. And in all these cases, physical interaction is more prominent because the pore size of adsorbent is reduced as equal to isopropyl alcohol. So isopropyl alcohol may contact more easily than through van der Waals forces. So physical interaction is more prominent.
Although nanotechnology is promising for remediation of pollutant in the environment, there is a certain body of evidences that indicate application of NPs also produce some uncertainties and risks. Ecosystem studies with proper long-term evaluation are needed for preventing any potential adverse environmental effect that might be caused by them. That's all from our side. Thank you.